this edition of Sightings, everyone loved Skipper Parker. That's why his murder was as shocking as it is mysterious. Now, a psychic may have information that can help solve this horrible crime.
He knew who did it.
How do sacred sites around the world help heal body and soul?
I got in more trouble than anyone could ever imagine.
It was called Project Blue Book, and it continues to raise more questions about UFOs than it answers.
I'd hate to think that Project Blue Book was the best we could do.
A controversy rages over whether computers should store the total output of the human mind.
Which would leave you with an 80-year-long home video.
And a look at the better angels of Andy Lakey's life.
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. A teenage life cut short, a senseless murder, no witnesses. It's a story told too often in the news. The names, the faces may change, but the family's grief and law enforcement's frustration never change. In North Carolina, where the brutal murder of Skipper Parker remains unsolved, his parents have vowed to try everything before they give up. Will it be a psychic detective who finally cracks the case?
It's very clear to me. I'm experiencing it right along with the victim. It's like a movie in my head.
The movie playing in Nancy Meyer's head right now is a true story. With the clarity and impact of a 70mm screen, Meyer says she is seeing only what the killers have seen. The death of Skipper Parker.
You're haunted every moment that you live and breathe. All you can think about is how or why. How could this possibly happen to your child? You try to protect them and do everything you can to take care of that child. And then one moment, someone can just take that all away from you.
The how and why still elude police. Skipper was so loved, so innocent, and his death was so random.
It would appear that this young man was on the way to work. While in his truck, he was fired on by some unknown assailant. One of those projectiles struck and killed him. The truck then ran off the road, struck a tree, and came to rest.
The last time that we saw Skipper was around 3 a.m. the day that he died. He was extremely happy that morning and very talkative. Did not seem to have a care in the world. Was to report to work at 4 o'clock, and he never made it.
Up to now, the police have, I think, to the best of their abilities, done what they can, given with the resources that they have available to them. And it's been tough for our family because we want the answer and we want it now. We've
pursued many leads that have led us nowhere, and we've pursued some leads that have given us some information, but certainly not any that has led to the identification of the suspects in the case. The case is still open, the case is still unsolved.
The crime shocked everyone in Oak Ridge, North Carolina. Skipper Parker was so well liked, the feeling around town is that the murderer must be a stranger.
From the first day that he was born, he came here with boundless energy. He had a real zest for life, and he made a lot of people very happy.
Skipper's personality was wonderful. He could befriend anyone. He found the good in everyone.
Skipper had just graduated from the Oak Ridge Military Academy, where he'd risen from the rank of private to captain in less than 2 years.
He thoroughly enjoyed the regalia, and he enjoyed the camaraderie and the brotherhood of the Corps. He did very well.
Greensboro, North Carolina homicide detective John Barrow had been working the Parker murder for several months before Skipper's family asked Nancy Meyer to join the investigation. They were impressed by Meyer's track record. In 20 years as a psychic detective, Meyer claims she has provided new leads in 90% of the cases she's been asked to investigate.
I hope that Nancy Meyer can pick up something that they're missing. A clue, a vibration, whatever it takes to solve this crime.
I've never worked with a psychic in a criminal investigation or in any way. This was first proposed by the family. My position with the family has been that if this is something they want to do and it's not interfering with the investigation, and I think it's a position of me as investigator, and the Greensboro Police Department will accommodate them any way we can.
Meyer works with crime scene photos first to set the reels of her psychic projector in motion.
When I work from photos with an impact like this, it's almost instantaneous. When it starts to roll, it's so strong, it's like I'm right in the middle of it.
Her first psychic impression was one that Skipper's friends and family had not considered.
He knew who did it. This was not random. It may look random, but he knew them. Actually, it seems like a sort of a running conflict. Money's involved.
From one photograph, a psychic vision of the murder emerged.
And he's looking at the driver, and there's a passenger, and there is someone in the back seat. There are 3 young men there. And he knows the driver, and he knows the person in the passenger seat. Well, all 3 of them are early 20s, 19, somewhere around. They're all about the same age.
After studying the disturbing pictures for more than an hour, Meyer began to describe the killer.
There's some schooling in common between the 2 of them. There's a ring on his right hand that looks like a heavy class ring. And there's something on the side other than the date. It's a symbol that looks almost like a naval symbol of some sort. And the conflict between the shooter and the victim started way back. He seems to have been very jealous of the victim, jealous of the friendliness of the victim, jealous of the victim's success with young ladies.
Detective Barrow sat stone-faced on camera. He does not want to give away just how much the police know.
I don't feel like this is a fully premeditated murder in the sense of he set out to kill this young man. I think he set out to scare him and lost control of himself in the process.
I think she's intuitive, and I think she's perceptive. There are some perceptions, perhaps, that are similar to some information that we already have available, but the accuracy of the information provided will only be borne out based on the investigation.
Meyer agreed not to reveal where the case stands now, but said the killer will be caught.
They've got 2 very good cops on this. You got 2 bloodhounds. They're great. They'll go after it. They're going to dig and dig and dig.
And Nancy Meyer was also able to reassure the Parker family that their youngest son was blameless in the brutal attack.
I don't feel that the victim holds any responsibility in any way for what happened here. There are victims that put themselves in situations. This young man has done nothing wrong. He's basically a really nice kid.
Catching his killer is crucial, but remembering Skipper's zest and joy for life is more important still.
He was so special to me. I think anybody that ever knew him will never forget him.
My world stopped that day, I can tell you. And that's, we have 3 other children, and that doesn't mean a thing. We love them just like we always did. But we have 1 less now.
As the Greensboro Homicide Squad investigates the fresh leads that Nancy Meyer has given them, Sightings will try to keep you updated on their progress. Meanwhile, the search for Skipper's murderer continues.
Next, the surprising healing powers of Earth's sacred sites.
The sacred sites are wonderful to take the kids to because it gives them a chance to start over and turn over a new leaf.
Teachers who work with troubled kids know that the only rule is that there are no rules. And as so often happens, programs that were once tried and true just don't seem to work anymore. Perhaps that's why new and controversial programs that expose teens to the paranormal are gaining a foothold in the classroom.
What good are ancient mystical practices in a 20th century world of chaos, conflict, and senseless violence? What can shamans or cloistered monks offer to children who aren't even safe in their own neighborhoods? Apparently, quite a lot. In Los Angeles, a foundation called Healing the Causes of Violence has brought in Tibetan monks to teach juvenile offenders meditation and the sacred ritual of sand painting.
We introduce the Tibetan culture because one of the things with children like this, their view of the world is quite narrow. In fact, they don't know anything outside of their immediate neighborhood.
The firewalk of ancient cultures is now reborn as a way to instill courage and self-esteem in troubled teens.
The benefit of walking on fire is the very fact that they are taking more action in their lives and thus taking more control in their lives.
And kids with deep emotional problems are being taken to sacred Native American sites. It is here, many of them say, that they feel peaceful for the first time.
Sacred sites emit a certain amount of geo-anomaly energy that you're not going to find at other places. And those earth energy frequencies can affect our brain chemicals. And that brain chemistry can make changes in our attitudes, in our actions, and in our health.
Bernice Barlow has two careers. She is an Earth Mysteries researcher and writer who has long espoused the healing power of Native American sacred sites. Bernice is also a counselor who works with out-of-control teens. And recently, when she began combining the two into one new therapy, Bernice discovered that the results were magical. Tight-lipped, angry kids began to open up because, Bernice says, the energy flowing from sacred sites can reach into the deepest recesses of the human heart.
The sacred sites are wonderful to take the kids to because it gives them a chance to start over and turn over a new leaf and kind of wash away everything that's been in the past. So take a deep breath and release hurt, anger, confusion. Whatever you want to let go of, let go of.
By the time he was 11, Ronnie Pilcher had been in and out of so many schools and residential treatment centers that his mother began to fear that the next stop for Ronnie would be prison.
He wanted to run the streets. He wanted to get in and out of trouble. He's always breaking things up. I got in more trouble than anyone could ever imagine because I'd do anything just to get in trouble.
My first impressions of Ronnie were that he was out of control, that he manipulated adults, that he liked to get into fights, and that he was going to be a very difficult child to work with because he had no impulse control and he had very little respect, not only for other people, but he had very, very little respect for himself.
The McKinley School for Boys in California was Ronnie's last chance, and this is where he met Bernice Barlow. She brought him to this sacred site and showed him the ancient rituals that Native Americans used to ease pain and heal themselves.
Make sure all of our rocks are in perfect alignment. And when everything is in line and everything is balanced, things work much better. He found through the earth and through the medicine wheel that he could not only find identity and belonging, but that he could learn life lessons.
The American medicine wheel, like the Tibetan sand mandala, is used to teach and to focus thought.
The simple wheel that Ron started on just explained nature, explained creation, the women's position on Earth, the men's position on Earth, the duality and the balance.
The wheel, for some of us, was a part of us. No matter what, we would be there, and it would listen to our problems. And if you had open ears and you could listen real better, it would tell you what to do about it.
Ron used it as a visual. He could actually see on the ground, as the stones were placed out, where he was on the earth and what position that he was supposed to take.
He works 8.5 hours.
8.5.
He works 8.
Dr. Jean Quinn has been a teacher and educational therapist for over 40 years. She believes Ronnie has benefited from Bernice's non-traditional approach.
Bernice's program was an all-encompassing program. It included everything that children learn in school, not just taking in all of what children need to learn, but also administering to the needs that the children have missed out on.
Some Earth scientists hypothesize that sacred sites emit resonant waves of electromagnetism, a kind of natural biofeedback that can calm the mind and relax the body. Bernice believes that this may be why her students can meditate, think more deeply, and speak more freely here than in a classroom.
Think of all the things that you want to let go in your life. And just like leaves on a tree, just watch them float down to the earth. The Schumann resonance will eventually cause the body to slow down and get in concert with the earth resonance. And that's where the kids find control. That's where they find creativity, and that's where they find themselves.
What sacred sites have done for me is getting to know my inner self instead of approaching my outer self and doing what I usually do, violence.
Ronnie's progress has been phenomenal. I see the changes in Ronnie at the sacred sites. He becomes more spiritual. He is more in control. And Ron in control is a child that has a great future. A great future.
And as Ronnie begins community college, his progress is being echoed by other teenagers exposed to the sacred rituals of the past.
It did wonders for me in the manners of respecting other people. The sacred sites are a source of energy much greater than you can ever think of.
Since his exposure to the Sacred Healing Program, Ronnie Pilcher has formulated a plan for his own future. First, he plans to finish college, then enlist in the service. Ronnie tells Sightings that his ultimate goal is to become an Army medic so that he can dedicate his life to helping others.
Next, getting inside Area 51. The astrological signs of the times. And later, re-examining Project Blue Book.
Here are some of the stories Sightings has been following in the news. It's known as Groom Lake, Dreamland, Area 51, a super-secret military installation where, many people believe, extraterrestrials are being held against their will. After years of speculation, finally, you can peek under the veil of secrecy via your computer.
On the World Wide Web, Dreamland Interactive is the closest most people will ever get to entering Area 51. Information on the Dreamland site comes from declassified documents and secret sources, with an ample sprinkling of rumor and conjecture. Longtime UFO researcher Ernie Green has designed the site to resemble a virtual Area 51, where users can explore and then discuss UFO projects. The site also covers a wide array of other UFO-related topics, including aliens, black projects, government disinformation, and abductions. New images are being added all the time, such as this newly discovered crop circle, and more cattle deaths, which some say are UFO-related. Green prides himself on being a hands-on designer and ufologist, and he says he is constantly updating and expanding his site. If you'd like to connect with Dreamland Interactive, the address is www.fordreamland.com. In Phoenix, Arizona, the release of a new book from world-renowned astrologer Noel Till takes prophecy and prediction in a whole new direction. In Predictions for a New Millennium, Till has compiled an unusual collection of birth charts, but these don't chart the future path of any individual. Rather, the future course of nations.
Nations have birth data. They are born just as individuals are. We have an imprint placed upon us by the time, date, place of our birth. This portrait becomes your personality, your list of potentials, the dynamism of your presentation to your future.
Critics charge that Till's predictions are based on a pseudoscience more relevant for comic books than world leaders. But Till's traditional research methods and computer simulations do seem to give him an edge.
There's nothing supernatural about it. It is a method of measurement. It's like projecting stocks, or predicting the weather, or a doctor telling you about the prognosis for a disease.
In the past, Till has impressed even his detractors with accurate predictions about the fall of the USSR, the Gulf War, and the Arab-Israeli peace accord.
As an astrologer, I know the past feeds the future. And we were able, in studying the past in a special humanistic way, to come up with the themes that will change the world.
Till predicts that China will dominate economically and the U.S. will dominate politically. A president will die in office near the turn of the 21st century, and Till believes that the year 2005 will be the most dramatic in the history of humankind.
2004 and 5. The United States has a tremendous probability of making contact with outer space intelligence.
And Till says this contact will redraw the boundaries of not only the cosmos, but of Earth, and that a new age of global accord will emerge.
We'll have more stories in the news next time. Now, here's what's coming up as Sightings continues.
Operation Blue Book was the government's only official investigation of UFOs.
I don't think they want the public to know that they don't have the answer for it. So maybe that's where this conspiracy idea comes from.
Find out why it's raised more questions than it's answered.
In 1969, the Beatles were in, short hair was out, and the Air Force slammed the door on Project Blue Book, the U.S. government's only acknowledged study of UFOs and extraterrestrials. By terminating official interest in flying saucers and little green men, the Air Force thought that public interest in UFOs would also disappear. It didn't, and it still hasn't.
Several important milestones captured the nation's attention in 1969. Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon. Flower power peaked in a muddy farm in upstate New York. And the war in Vietnam was raging under Richard Nixon's watch. And on December 17th, 1969, few were aware that the Air Force, with little fanfare, terminated its 22-year-long Project Blue Book. Veteran UFO investigators like Don Berliner have been asking why ever since.
From the shutting down of Blue Book until today, the Air Force hasn't said anything beyond, we've studied the subject, there's nothing to it, we've lost interest. I don't believe it.
Berliner believes that the military has covered up the UFO reality from day one, ever since the very first sighting the Air Force examined, Kenneth Arnold's disturbing saucer sighting of 1947. Soon after, growing concerns about national security led to the creation of Blue Book.
Since the Air Force has the responsibility of protecting our skies, if there's something flying around, they better know what it is. Because there was fear initially that they might be Soviet.
As the program grew and additional sightings were investigated, they suddenly decided, well, there is a possibility that these things are from extraterrestrial origins.
This didn't go down well with the higher-ups. They wanted everything explained, no matter how it was done.
The kind of explanation the higher-ups were demanding was not one that countenanced visitors from another planet. This was never more evident than in 1952, during the infamous UFO flap over Washington, D.C. Despite solid radar returns, Blue Book said it was either weird weather or a misidentified weather balloon.
Hundreds of reports showed the data and the explanation have no relation to each other. A typical case, two military pilots chase something that looks like an aluminum 50-foot disc. And when it's all over, Blue Book decides that it was two balloons, not one. They only saw one thing, but it ends up as two balloons. It's not the sort of thing where you could argue the fine points. There are no fine points.
Even the Air Force conceded that they couldn't explain everything. When Blue Book closed in 1969, 5% of all cases were still categorized as unknown. Ufologists say the government is being less than candid about what they really know. But a filmmaker and Defense Department consultant disagrees.
I don't see a cover-up. I think that they're very puzzled by this phenomenon and can't get a handle on it. And it's sort of like, I don't think they want the public to know that they don't have the answer for it. So maybe that's where this conspiracy idea comes from.
Robert Friend headed up Blue Book from 1958 to 1963 and insists that the project was open-minded about UFOs.
UFOs exist, alien spacecraft, that's another thing. I don't believe all these people are running around reporting things that they imagine. They see something, and that's a UFO. It's unidentified, and it's an object. But that's still not an Air Force mission. The Air Force's concern was whether or not it had any intelligence value and whether or not it constituted a threat to our national security.
Ufologists don't believe that Robert Friend is hiding the truth, just that he wasn't in on all the secrets.
Whether or not there was a second or third investigation behind the smokescreen of Project Blue Book is still highly debatable. I certainly hope there was. I'd hate to think that Project Blue Book was the best we could do.
If a hidden agenda existed, Berliner was determined to expose it. In 1974, he obtained Air Force permission to copy nearly 600 of the more than 12,000 cases in the official Blue Book files.
There were dozens of file drawers full, and I only had a week, so I had to concentrate on the unexplained cases. And so I managed to get all the information, including witness names. The Air Force then decided that they were afraid of suits under the Privacy Act if the names of witnesses got out. So they pulled the files out of circulation, removed all identification of witnesses, forgetting that I already had hundreds of them.
The Air Force sent the newly censored documents to the National Archives in 1976, and those are what UFO researchers will find to this day. Thousands of documents with identifying information blacked out or unreadable.
They wanted to make it as difficult as possible for people to reinvestigate cases. You can't tell if a report came from a nearsighted plumber or from the commander of an Air Force fighter squadron.
According to Friend, blackouts protect private citizens, not the government.
I'm not saying that there isn't life somewhere in this huge cosmos. What I am saying is that I don't believe that anyone yet has solved the problem of getting across these vast distances.
One Blue Book investigator who didn't toe the party line was J. Allen Hynek, an astronomy professor who would later coin the term close encounters of the third kind.
Dr. J. Allen Hynek was the Air Force consultant in astronomy, and he had been working for the Air Force since 1948. He had been a rather avid skeptic about the whole thing until he got to the Lonnie Zamora case.
In 1964, Lonnie Zamora reported that an ovoid spacecraft had landed near Socorro, New Mexico. It was a pivotal case for a lot of skeptics because Zamora, a police officer, was such a credible witness. And his report was followed by more reliable sightings all over the country. So many, in fact, that at Hynek's urging, the Air Force commissioned its first scientific UFO investigation.
And the University of Colorado took the contract for about $500,000 and studied it for about 2 years before they issued their report. And then when their report came out negative, then the Air Force said, okay, we're out of the UFO business.
Hall believes the panel was intentionally misled and that their report was an elaborate ruse and a defining moment in UFO history. Stanton Friedman defines it as the moment the government alienated millions of its people.
Most people think most people don't believe in UFOs, even though all the polls have consistently shown not only that most people do believe in UFOs, but that the greater the education, the more likely to believe in UFOs.
The legacy of Project Blue Book is that the Air Force could have done a terrific job of investigating thousands of potentially important UFO cases, but didn't. A ton of information was ignored.
But the information is out there, somewhere, and we all have the right to see it, ufologists say. But while researchers continue to unearth evidence of a cover-up, the Air Force continues to insist that UFOs pose no threat, do not advance science, and do not come from outer space. But lingering doubts, even within the hallowed halls of the Pentagon itself, indicate that the death of Blue Book may have been premature.
In 1969, an American citizen inquiring why Project Blue Book was dropped likely received a form letter stating, quote, "There is no evidence to indicate that further investigation of UFOs is warranted," end quote. And if you inquire about Blue Book at the Air Force today, you will receive an almost identical form letter.
Next, how computer science will make it possible to store a life in cyberspace.
We're not talking about recording consciousness, we're talking about television.
Will cyborgs one day rule the galaxy? Researchers at British Telecom have already conceived of a device that makes a future world of human replicants a distinct possibility. The idea is founded on the theory that extraordinary advances in microchip technology will soon allow you to record for posterity everything you see, feel, and think.
At birth, it was implanted. Now, at death, it is being impounded. Doctors are removing something from this man's brain that contains a recording of every moment of his life. It's installed in a computer, and now that computer, controlled by the human brain, will live on forever. This is not a science fiction movie. It is the future. A microchip capable of storing your consciousness. It's been dubbed the soul catcher, and futurists predict that the technology may be ready within the next 30 years.
I think it would just take the form of a record of what your mind was doing at that time, what impulses were coming into your mind, what you were seeing through your eyes and hearing through your ears and so on, maybe even what you were feeling, all the different impulses into your brain.
Ian Pearson is a professional dreamer. As a futurologist for British Telecom, the worldwide communications giant, Pearson's job is to predict the future, not through a crystal ball or tea leaves, but with scientific vision.
What I do is I talk to a lot of experts and I read a lot of industry press and so on, and try to keep well informed on what's happening now and make some guesswork as to where it's going to be in X years' time.
Pearson conceived of the soul catcher after figuring out that the sum total of an 80-year-old's consciousness equals 10 terabytes, 10 million bytes of computer memory. An amount, says Pearson, that computers will soon be able to process.
We expect a computer by 2015 to have roughly the same memory capacity as you do, and we expect it also around about the same time, plus or minus 5 years, to have the same intelligence.
No one questions Pearson's time frame for the necessary technology, but could a plastic machine loaded with your consciousness ever really be you?
Well, if I have this right, they're talking about implants that would record all of an individual's audiovisual input throughout their lifetime, which, as far as I can see, would leave you with an 80-year-long home video. It's a very Western concept of existence.
William Gibson burst onto the science fiction scene in 1984 with the publication of Neuromancer, in which he coined the term cyberspace. In his screenplay for Johnny Mnemonic, Gibson wrote about a man who could upload his brain directly. But the reality of recording and storing human consciousness in a computer, Gibson says, is not even close to science fiction.
Imagine that we could go back and implant one of these things for one day in Einstein, and then get it back to the time machine and run it back. We're sitting there, Einstein has stopped, he's looking at a tree. He looks at the tree for 15 minutes, and then he walks on. What we all want to know is, what was he thinking about? Which we don't know. So we're not talking about recording consciousness, we're talking about television.
Doctors and scientists who study the brain agree. Human consciousness isn't simply a matter of record, rewind, and play back.
The whole notion of uploading the wiring in someone's brain at death so that you boot up the computer and there's the person back. The sort of pure mind and silico, notion that you get from this, I think is very unlikely, simply because a brain without a body is really a fish out of water.
William Calvin is a theoretical neurophysiologist at the University of Washington in Seattle. In his just published book, How Brains Think, Calvin puts the notion of a soul catcher implant in perspective.
That sort of neural tap is further away than I think people realize. We don't know the coding schemes yet that you'd have to mimic to do these things. We are capable of only handling about a dozen nerve cells at the same time with any precision. And that to do anything fancy would require millions.
Building a computer with enough memory to replicate the way the human brain works may be centuries away, but perhaps that is not the only way to create true consciousness in a machine.
We'll get a lot better at some point. There has been work done that it has people actually controlling computers, especially people with severe handicaps, with the nerve signals from muscles in their head.
Computer engineer Keith Henson has devoted much of his career to the exploration of computer-brain interface.
As nanotechnology comes along, we'll be able to tap into what's going on in human brains, being able to actually, if you will, eavesdrop on the connections that are being made between nerve cells. And something very close to telepathy will exist between human beings and their computer counterparts.
Nanotechnology is a newly emerging field of engineering that's working toward building machines smaller than a single human cell. In lay terms, instead of putting your brain in a computer, we'll have the ability to put a computer in your brain. But does an essentially battery-operated brain without a body equal immortality?
I would define relative immortality as some sort of ongoing consciousness for me, as opposed to those models in which, say, my consciousness is downloaded into something else, which then becomes immortal. But I have to stand there watching it walk away, and I will subsequently die. So personally, if they can't continue my consciousness from in here, from this point, it's not immortality.
While it is true, as William Gibson says, that we know very little about the essence and the mechanics of human consciousness, it is also true that figuring out what makes us who we are is not beyond knowing.
It's very difficult to know exactly what people will do with such kinds of abilities. I think that we are far less than a century away from, if you will, almost transcendent humanity. People that are so far above us in their ability to think and to comprehend and to understand the universe that's around us that it will be very difficult for them to even relate to our era.
It should be emphasized that right now, soul catcher experiments are still at the theoretical stage. But the ethical implications of human testing need to be addressed now. We should start to formulate an ethical standard for microchip implants before computers decide for us.
Next, the angelic mission of a former drug user.
Instead of going home and doing a line of Coke or drinking a beer, I wanted to create my angels.
On a past edition of Sightings, we introduced you to Andy Lakey. He's an artist and philosopher who's driven by a mysterious desire to paint 2,000 angel pictures by the year 2000. A visit with Andy today finds him still in his studio, but also on the streets, helping kids stay off drugs. He's developed his own unique program because Andy once walked that dark road himself and knows how to fight back and win.
Do you like the painting?
Yeah. When artist Andy Lakey was a boy this age, he wasn't creative, compassionate, or even really here at all. He was a drug addict.
My next door neighbor was my 7th grade buddy. His brother was a high school drug dealer. So I used to dabble in smoking a little pot back then. That continued into my adult life.
Andy thought he was just a dabbler, that he could stop anytime he wanted. But a brush with death in 1986 proved him wrong.
That night, we were freebasing Coke and snorting a little Coke. I felt my body shutting down, and in the party, I wanted to get out of the party. I felt paranoid, I felt embarrassed. I felt like if I was going to die, I wanted to die alone. I got down to my apartment. I literally fell into my apartment, and all I knew is I wanted to get near water. So I crawled to the shower, I crawled into the shower, turned the cold water on. My clothes were still on, and I remember the water going all over my face and going down the back of my neck. And I started to pray to God for the first time since I was 8 years old that if He'd let me live, not only would I quit doing drugs, it's easy to say that at that moment, but I'd do something to help mankind. and a twirling sensation almost instantly started to happen. The best way to describe it is like a mini tornado. And there were 7 figures on the bottom around my feet. These 7 figures turned into one, and they put their arms around me. The figures looked like there was 2 arms or stubs that were sticking out with a head that was elevated above the body with just a very narrow, smooth torso.
Andy had overdosed and ended up in the hospital. It was the beginning of a new and drug-free life. Andy gives a lot of the credit to the amorphous figures who appeared to him near death. They're called Lakey's Angels and have become the inspiration for Andy's life work, the subject of his art.
Instead of going home and doing a line of Coke or drinking a beer, I wanted to create my angels.
First, they were doodles, then sketches. Then, in 1989, Andy Lakey walked out on a lucrative career to devote his full time to celebrating his angels through paint and canvas. Soon, the figures that changed Andy's life were reaching out and healing others, like Matthew, who, after the Northridge earthquake of 1994, developed a serious condition requiring surgery.
The night before my surgery, there was a special on Andy's artwork and stories about other angels. And when I walked off of the elevator for my surgery, there in front of me was a picture of Andy's. As I touched it and felt it, I felt relaxed, and I felt like I had an inner peace in me. I wasn't as scared about my surgery, and I felt like somebody was telling me that everything is gonna be okay and not to be scared.
Matthew was not the only member of his family to be transformed by Lakey's Angels. His mother and brother felt the power of the paintings too.
Just feeling those angels, you can feel the power that comes from them, the calmness, the serenity.
I believe in angels. I've always believed in them, but the Northridge earthquake, I got so scared I went into my mom's room, and my brother bought me one of Andy's paintings, and it makes me less nervous about the earthquake, and I'm not as scared anymore.
When Sightings first brought you Andy Lakey's story, he had just completed 1,000 of the 2,000 paintings he said the angels had asked him to complete by the year 2000. Since then, he has completed 650 more. And just recently, Andy initiated a program to ensure that many of his last angel pieces will make a real difference in the world.
Well, if children out there send me a letter, if they're 18 years old or under, in the letter, if they write that they promise they won't do drugs or smoke cigarettes, at least till they're out of high school, I'll send them an original drawing or a painting or a sketch, something originally created by me from my studio.
The response to Andy's offer has been overwhelming.
I've received thousands of letters from kids from all over America, and it's really exciting when you look at a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old or an 18-year-old saying, Andy, or dear Mr. Lakey, I promise
I will never do drugs, drink alcohol, smoke cigarettes, or do anything bad like that. I'm 11 years old, and I want to live until I'm 100. I have always believed in angels. Love, Ashley.
So if I can get kids to focus in on their schools and not doing drugs, it makes me feel that, you know, what I went through is well worth it.
Andy continues to share his story and his artwork with the world, especially the children who've been touched by Lakey's Angels. He's released an autobiography titled Andy Lakey, Art, Angels, and Miracles. And he has a webpage that Andy hopes will be a permanent ray of hope in cyberspace.
I was a person on a path of self-destruction. But today I'm able to focus, and because of my experiences, know that anything is possible in this world.
Andy Lakey enthusiastically encourages anyone interested in his program to contact him directly. If you're interested, you can reach Andy via the internet. His address is www.lakeyart.com.
If you've had a paranormal experience, please write to us at Sightings. Sightings can also be contacted at America Online at keyword Sightings. Download images, sounds, and QuickTime clips from Sightings episodes. On the internet, access information about sightings and the paranormal at sci-fi.com/sightings.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.
Next on Sci-Fi, Dark Shadows.
I got 2 more boats.
speed. Matthew Lillard, Freddie Prinze Jr.
I love this baby!
Wing Commander, Thursday at 9 on Sci-Fi.